And there's only so much that we can do to bring about peace in the world. In northern India, there's conflict between the Indians and the Pakistanis. There's been conflict recently between China and India. And there's so much conflict in the world. Now, today, in America, there's conflict in the nation's capital. And I've heard that one person was shot. And it's very sad whenever we hear about anything like this. There's so many terrorist attacks throughout the world, and so much conflict, so many difficulties, so many troubles. And of course, we'd all wish, as compassionate people, we'd all wish for peace. Earlier this year, there was a lot of rioting because there were difficulties with the police here killing black people. And people were protesting, just as now people are angry in Washington, D.C. because they think that there was unfair counting or some manipulation of the election. And so people are understandably upset. And they think that there's injustice. But we can't solve the problems of the world by adding to the injustice, adding to the violence in the world. Sometimes it may seem like it brings about a solution, but then people get more agitated, more angry, and then people will retaliate. In so many regions in the world, I think a lot of northern India with Pakistan and India, or I think of Israel, with Israel and Palestine, or Northern Ireland, between the Catholics and the Protestants. And just there's an act of violence, and then there's retaliation, and then there's retaliation, and then there's retaliation. And we've got to stop thinking that we can solve violence in the world with violence. I used to say, we can't put out a fire with a fire, but people corrected me. They said, well, actually, in certain cases, they use a controlled fire to control a fire, to burn up the oxygen of the fire. So I have to think up other examples now. We can't fight darkness. We can't combat darkness with darkness. I had another one. What was it? I had another analogy. It's not coming to me now. Maybe it will come to me later. In the same way, we can't oppose violence with violence. We just add to the violence in the world. We can't oppose injustice, with terrorism, with violence. But not everyone understands that. That's not in the instinctive nature. That's not in our animalistic, instinctive nature that's ingrained in the human mind and human body. We're not much better than other animals in that sense. If we become afraid, we're likely to run away or to attack. And that's what people do. And a lot of people are living in fear because they're very connected to these animal instincts. And there's not much that we can do to convince people when they're frightened, when they're enraged. You can't speak logically to a person who's too angry. They'll just keep yelling like a maniac. It's not sensible. It's not rational. Certainly, if you start yelling, you'll probably increase their fear, increase their discomfort. If you speak in a calm voice, try to calm them down, ease their concerns, it may help a little bit, but we can't do that on a global level. How can we ease conflict? Here in America, we can't or probably shouldn't travel to India. I don't know if they've opened up enough that we can travel to India. But even if they could, it may not be a good idea with COVID still as it is to travel there. How can we ease the conflict there when we're here in the US. There's only so much we can say or do that would influence anything there on a physical outer level. We don't have that much control over society and groups of hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world. One thing we can do is we can cultivate peace within ourselves. And that actually does help. On a level of consciousness, there's not as much separation. On the physical level, there's a lot of separation. I'd have some amount of difficulty to speak to someone in India. They couldn't hear me. They can't hear what I'm saying now unless we take a video and broadcast it on YouTube. And then they'd have to go to YouTube and click that link and watch that video. Either that or most people, I'd probably have to go in their dream and talk to them, or they wouldn't hear most people because they have too much chatter going on in their mind. They're not focused inwardly enough. They're listening only with the outer hearing of the ears. They're not listening inwardly enough to hear such a subtle message as what I might try to send if I was trying to communicate with someone telepathically, distantly. But on an inner level, the consciousness is connected. What we are feeling now influences the environment around us. And if you've ever gone into a building and you felt an intense feeling of fear or anger or sadness, you feel it sometimes. You go into someone's house and you just feel an energy of sadness everywhere. In certain places, they may have had a chair where they sit and watch TV depressed. You feel it a lot in that particular location. It really affects if you've gone to a house where drug addicts live, there's often a very cloudy energy around that house. It just feels very dull and depressing just to walk in. It feels very stagnant, and you would start to stagnate if you stayed there. What we do, what we think, what we feel has a great influence on the environment around us. But also, it has an effect on the consciousness of other people. Trees and plants, they are more aware of that. I've heard some spiritual teachers say that the animals and the plants are more elevated than humans in that sense, that they're more connected. I remember at the time of the tsunami in India, my Ayurveda teacher was still living at that time. And I had called him 3 weeks or a month before that and left him a message, just, "Hi, how are you doing? I was checking in, seeing how you're doing. Give me a call back when you can." And he was very busy getting ready to go to India, so he didn't call back. But then he was at the ashram of his guru, Ammachi, in South India, at the very southwestern tip of India, right on the ocean, is where she was born and where she's built her ashram. And he was there, and he thought of me, and he had a telephone he could call back to the United States. And he went down to the beach, and he said, "I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you before. I was very busy getting ready for going to India. I'm here for a month or 2 months or whatever. But I thought of you, and I thought I'll send you some nice energy from the ashram. So feel the nice energy. I'm out on the beach. It's so peaceful." And I said, "It feels too calm. It feels too still. There is something wrong." And he said, "Oh, no, you don't know what you're talking about. It's just the energy of the ashram working on you. It's clearing out your stuff. You don't know what you're talking about." So the next morning, the guru, Ammachi, went down to the water, and she said some prayers to the ocean, and she threw her shawl into the ocean, and then she came back to the ashram and to the village there, and she told everyone, she said, "Go now. Go as far as you can. Don't take your belongings. Don't waste time gathering them. Get people, get animals, and go as far as you can, as high as you can. Go now." And everyone in the ashram, that was their spiritual teacher. Of course, they listened to her and they left. A lot of the people in the village stayed. They said, "Oh, we don't have faith in this crazy lady. We're not going anywhere." They stayed, and unfortunately, a lot of the people in the village died. But the ashram, everyone left, so the people were fine, and the water came in, and it went up about 5 or 10 feet, and then it went back out, and everything was basically fine there in the ashram. He called me a week later, and he said, "Oh, I bet you were so worried about me." And I was like, "Well, No, honestly, it didn't occur to me to worry about you. I'm sorry, it didn't. He was fine, maybe I would have felt something if he was not fine, and I would have been worried, but he was okay. But one thing that happened at that time is that all of the animals left. The birds were flocking, and all of the wild animals, they left. They went inland. They got away before the tsunami came because they were still enough, silent enough to be aware of that. Whereas the people were not. They needed this spiritual master who was in a deep state of meditation, very calm and peaceful, to notice the warning signs around, to tell them that something was happening. And even with that, a lot of the people didn't listen, and they still stayed. We have weather people announcing these kind of things, and there's some people, they stay and get hurt by hurricanes and things like this. We as people are too clouded in our minds. We're not in a state of peace. Not in a state of peace. But the animals, they're aware. They see the other animals going. They know that something is wrong. They're connected more so on that level. Even a single animal that was distant from the flock would notice something and head inland or wherever would be safe. We as people are connected like this, whether we're aware of it or not. If you sit in your house or your apartment feeling depressed, feeling angry, feeling scared, you're sending out that energy, and it's affecting the consciousness of people around you. If you're in an apartment, you're very close to people. It may affect people a lot. It goes right through the walls, right through the floor. If you're in a place where we are, where you're 200 feet, 100, or what's 200 feet in meters? I'm trying to convert it for people from other places. We use the crazy system of feet and inches. It's hard to keep up with. Meters is 200 divided by 3 or so. I don't know what it is. 75 meters, something like that. We're at least that far from the nearest person, but still it would affect them somewhat, and it would affect them more than it would affect other people. But as we've prayed tonight, we've prayed for peace, and we've done something very important, and we're hopefully, now that we're recording the video, I want to do a few more of the mantra chanting so that people who watch this later on YouTube can also pray with us to increase the energy of peace. When we practice together, it increases the strength of that practice. It increases the potency of it. And when we think of our nation's capital, we can send the energy there to help ease conflict that's going on there. And really our prayers are for all of the world, all of the places I've thought of, and tonight in particular, Ireland, Israel, India, Sri Lanka, where the Buddhist and Hindu people have been warring for so long. China, all these places where we have conflict, when we mention them, we think of them, we send the energy there. I'll share an interesting story, and then maybe we'll do a few more times of the mantra, which maybe we can post the mantra text in the comments under the YouTube video. One time I was doing a fire ceremony. Some people came to me and they said, we don't know what to do. We've been living here for a while, and we feel like we're just not fulfilling our life's purpose. We've been kind of just hanging out with friends and having a good time, but we're not working a job, and we left family behind across the country and all that. And we're feeling like we need to take a next step. And so they had me do a fire ceremony for them, and they just to help them to gain clarity about that situation. And as we did that fire ceremony, one of them got very interested and fixated on the question, I don't know why, but they got very fixated on the question, how far does the energy go when we do this ceremony? And I said, well, it's possible for it to go a long distance. If we had to set up like a temple, it could go a long distance. It could be projected for hundreds of miles around us potentially, because a lot of rituals are done to help clear that space so that a powerful effect can be had as you do the ceremony. And a lot of rituals are done to clear blockages and obstacles towards sending out, and they build a temple tower that's designed to help project the energy outward to send peaceful, uplifting, happy energy out to people all around. But I told them, we're doing this in somebody's apartment. None of these rituals have been done. And then there's a lot of people living in this apartment who their energy is going to be like an obstacle. It will be a blockage. I told them I've noticed many times if I've ever done a ceremony in the forest, the trees and the forest atmosphere helps to support the energy of the ceremony and sends it out naturally. But if I do it in an urban place, the energy of the people kind of blocks it. You have to uplift the vibration of the place before then you can get the powerful vibration and even think about sending it out. And I said, but nonetheless, the people here in this apartment have been doing some spiritual practice and, so it will go out a little bit. But they kept pressing and they said, well, does it go to the whole city? And I said, well, more or less, a lot of the city will be feeling this probably fairly powerfully. And they said, well, will it go to this city? Will it go to this was in Norfolk, Virginia that we did this. And so they said, well, will it go to Hampton, Virginia? Will it go to Virginia Beach, Virginia? I said, yes, but a lot less. I said, it'll be very powerful for the people in this building and then this neighborhood, very, very, but a lot less in the surrounding cities. They said, what about further away city? Would they feel it at all or not at all? And so they were asking these, what about Richmond, Virginia? And I said, yes, more than Virginia Beach. And they were like, why? I was like, I don't know. That's a feeling. I don't know. And so they kept naming cities and we were like, Chicago. And yes, more than Virginia Beach. And I didn't understand it and they didn't understand it. But as a result of the ceremony, the next day they decided to go back home. And as they went back home, the cities that they had listed that I said, yes, the energy is going there, they stopped in each of those cities on their way back home. And so it's an interesting example that, I know, that was what I was feeling. I can't tell you that that's true. That was the feeling I got. And it was, to me, it was confirmed by them saying, yes, we actually stopped in all those cities. It was on the way to our hometown. To me, that was a confirmation, but I can't tell you that the energy went to Chicago for sure. Probably it did. Probably they carried some of it there with them as they went there. We definitely can have an effect on things when we do a spiritual practice. And we don't need to know any complex mantras or prayers. We can just sit and meditate on peace and stillness, and then when we're done, to offer that peace for the benefit of the world. So if there's any conflict you can think of in your life, in the world, that you want to pray for and think of and dedicate the merit of this practice, so to speak, to that cause, please do so as we pray and direct these energies in whichever direction. That's a beautiful thing about spiritual energies is you can't deplete it really necessarily. I mean, I guess to some extent we've done a certain amount of practice. It will have a certain effect, and what we think of, it will go there. And then you may need more and more and more to accomplish more. But at the same time, the more we pray, the more it brings about peace. The more we spread it, the more it increases. We shouldn't be selfish with spiritual blessings. We have to be generous, and then they increase. But so we'll say just a few more times of the Sahana Vavatu mantra. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahatnao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamasto ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamasto ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May there be peace to the whole world.